been touching that at all because it's not really our thing.
Hi everyone. Welcome to the Tom's Hardware Podcast for June 13th, 2023. As always, I'm Tom's Hardware Editor-in-Chief, Avram Pilch, and I am joined by Associate Editor Les Pounder, Raspberry Pi expert Ash Hill, and our very special guest, FC, aka Freakyclown, who is an ethical hacker uh, who, uh, who has recently published a book called How I Rob Banks. Uh, so, uh, so, FC, what can you tell us about yourself and your book? And do you really rob banks?
So so first of all, yes, I really do rob banks. My name is FC. I am a ethical hacker, and I have been for the last 30 years. I now live in the US, despite being a Brit. My wife and I moved here recently, and we run a cybersecurity consultancy firm called Sygenta. And as part of that, basically, companies come to us and say, how can you break into our system? So whether or not that's digitally or physically, break into our stuff and then tell us how you did it so that we can fix it. And then we help them sort of understand what those issues are. So it's all legal and above board. But yes, I do break into banks physically as well as digitally and steal things.
Awesome. That's so have you got the US, right?
That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
So what are the things that your kind of tools of the trade that you use to test to test online security?
Yeah, so when we're doing digital security, we're using lots of computing power, like up in AWS and Google Cloud and Azure, for example. Also, our computers in our house. We're doing that sort of stuff. Generally running Kali Linux. My main operating system is Black Arch, which is a similar sort of thing to Kali, but built on Arch. But we do actually use Raspberry Pis as part of our physical testing. So there's a nice little overlap between a physical pen test and a digital pen test where we can physically break into somewhere and then implant some kind of device that we can then use to compromise their digital networks.
Wow. So you go into a bank and you plant something there and
Exactly. And that's exactly like what criminals do. We've seen many cases of this where they break into a bank. It's generally at the sort of the front end type post offices that have a bank to one side. They're not quite well protected. They get some device like a USB stick that's plugged into them, that sort of thing. And we're trying to simulate all of the attacks that criminals would. So that is one of the attack vectors we try.
Wow. So have you ever gotten caught by a security guard?
So interestingly, I've been doing this for almost 3 decades, and I have 100% success rate of getting into everywhere, and only 2 incidents where things went slightly awry. But both of those were not me being caught; they were the client messing up on the testing and kind of making things go awkwardly bad.
Ah, I see. Wow. That
Yeah.
that is that's amazing that you have not been caught.
Yeah,
So
and concerning.
Well, it's not that I'm like this super amazing guy that can do all of this stuff. It's not that. It's just that there's always a way in. When you're doing physical penetrations of buildings, there is always a way in. It is always a matter of time and money, and that's the same for the digital side, to be honest, as well. It's like as long as the criminal has time and they can take advantage of any moment that happens, you're always going to get in. So it's not about me being amazing at this. I'm obviously pretty good at it. Over the years, I've got better, but it's the fact that the odds are stacked in my favor.
so when you say you're always getting in and it's a matter of time as well as money,
Mm-hmm.
what are the sort of things you look for in trying to to either penetrate a website or penetrate a building?
Pretty much the same things for both of them. Actually, it's generally looking for how security has been implemented poorly, right? So you get a lot of places that put in loads of money into either their digital security or the physical security, and generally someone misconfigures something. There's a great story in the book that Les showed just there about a £60,000 door, which a company put in. They put this £60,000 door in, and the way it was configured when they installed it meant that there was a security flaw, which allowed me to just literally walk into this building, bypassing all of their security because they had installed it incorrectly. And that's the biggest flaw I see everywhere, is things being installed incorrectly.
Right. So is it just financial institutions that you do this type of testing for?
No. We do testing for basically all sectors, but our main ones are financial sector. We do some government stuff. We've done some military stuff. We've done a lot of commercial stuff as well. So everyone's just as bad as each other, to be honest.
It's
reassuring.
Yeah,
that's very reassuring. I mean, I guess everybody's bad. What do you What do you feel like consumers should be looking for when they're trying to find the most secure place to do business, to shop, to have to put their money?
Well, that's a hard one because, like I say, there's always going to be a way, and you have to weigh up the risk versus reward of whatever it is you're using. Right. But there are some basic things like, do they have security cameras in the right places? Like, these are things that normal people aren't going to be looking for. It's an odd world that I live in, that everything I see the security flaws in them before I sort of really think about it. So I can walk into a building and tell you how many cameras are there and if they're in the right places, etc., or what their security mechanisms for the doors are like. That's a gut instinct to me now because I do it so often. So for me to say to a regular person, like, you should be looking for these things, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Like, you can overthink these things. They're all going to have issues. Like I say, no one is better than anyone else, and there's always an issue that is going to maybe be leveraged. But just realize that having your money in a bank is going to be insured up to a certain amount. So don't worry about it too much.
Yep. So what about someone's internal computer and network? What would you do to pen test yourself?
So the biggest tip that I can give to any corporation, anyone, anywhere, right, even on your home network, if you're somewhat savvy, is to segment everything. The more you segment your network, the safer you are, because one of the hardest things that I find when I'm doing pen tests is lateral movement across a network that is segmented. Mm-hmm. Now, it doesn't have to be like a full-on military air gap system. They're difficult, but just segmenting off like your home TV system to your kids' Xbox and PlayStation, like, separation of those areas, even at home, will massively increase your security.
When you say separation, can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean?
Yeah, so when you have a network, everything is on that one network. You can segment those networks apart into separate entities so that basically one network can't really talk to the other one. It can just get internet access and that's it. Because if you were in, say, an office, for example, and you've got like a HR department, a finance department, a paint department, a sales department, not every department needs to talk to every other department, right? So you find like, what is the least privileges that I need to give this network in order to do their job? And you basically subnet those off, whether that's via a virtual LAN or actual subnetting or any other means that you wish to segment. But segmenting those and separating those networks and into those departments is much safer.
So how do you, if I wanted to, say, test the Wi-Fi security in my house, like, what would be the best way to try to see if I could intercept Wi-Fi in my home? Is that still a consideration now that people are using 256-bit encryption?
I would say no. Like, so I get these questions all the time, like, is this safe or is that safe? Like, is what I'm doing at home really safe now? Like, is some hacker going to sit outside and break into my home network and get all my photos via my doorbell? And it's like, what is the likelihood of that happening? Like, that's really, really low, right? Like, even in an area where I live now, the chance of a hacker with those skills and that hardware sitting within distance of my house to do that is very, very low, right? Like, insecurity, we'd love to sort of sell you all that fear, but in reality, it's not happening. Like, we see a lot of these scaremongering stories online where people are going to hack in through your kids' toys and stuff. And it's like, well, has it actually ever happened? Like, there's been one or two edge cases, maybe, but I really wouldn't worry about, sort of, no one's going to come along and sniff your Wi-Fi. Where you're more likely to find that is when you are out at a coffee shop, for example, and you're connecting to that network. You don't know whose network that is, and it's probably unsafe. So worry about when you're out rather than when you're in. Like I say, you can get a little bit too paranoid sometimes. And it sort of stops you from using things that are there for your convenience.
Yeah, no, I get that. I do think people are paranoid. I've just been trying for a long time to figure out how I would sort of recreate the coffee shop situation in a controlled environment. Like, how would I, what's the best tool for doing for sort of simulating what would happen there, like a Wi-Fi sniffer, Wireshark, something like that.
So there's a brilliant tool called a Wi-Fi Pineapple, which does all of the interesting things, and they're relatively cheap. You do have to be careful using them because you might be breaking some laws, and that's the biggest thing I'd say if you're going to start messing around with this sort of thing, is really understand the laws that you may be encountering in your area. And I can't tell you which ones, because the ones in the UK are different from the ones in the US, and they'll be different to wherever the other listeners are. You have to understand the law more than anything. And then once you understand the law, understand the ethics of what you're doing. It may seem fun to do a demonstration of a coffee shop and capture all the Wi-Fi around you, but you are breaking the law and you may see something that you shouldn't. And there's ethical issues with that. So you have to understand those two before you get to the technical thing. And the technical thing is always the easiest bit anyway.
I used to have a friend that did freelance network security, and to get clients, he would go to places like eye doctors or physicians, places where HIPAA laws are concerned, and he would sit outside and see if they had any wireless printers that he could connect to, and he would just print off on their printer, hey, you're violating HIPAA by having this unsecured. Here's my name. You can call me and I'll set this up. And that was probably really dumb to do, but he got a lot of business that way because they were scared from the legality on their side of it.
Oh my God. That's like going up to someone and shooting them and saying, well, you shouldn't have been crosswalking. Or jaywalking, as I was calling it. It's like,
It worked,
break one law to try and fix another one. That's a terrible, terrible idea.
Yeah, know the laws first. Ethical hacking.
Ethical hacking. That's the key part there.
Well, so talking of hacking.
Oh, sorry, you were going to say?
Talking of hacking, FC, have you seen Raspberry Pi being used in a hack, or have you used it yourself?
Yeah, I have actually. We were just talking briefly about this before we got on air. Like back in 2013, I used one of the first Raspberry Pis that came out. I can't remember when it was actually launched, but it would have been
2012.
Yeah. Okay. So it was pretty new. I used it on a job for it was for a government site. We were asked to do a physical pen test of this government site, and it was quite a secure building. But what I did was I broke in to that site, stole a phone, a VoIP phone, took the VoIP phone apart, put a Raspberry Pi into it, all wired up nicely, put the phone back together so the phone still worked as a VoIP phone, then broke back into the building the second time and put it back where it should be. And all of the power was is vampired off of the VoIP board anyway. I actually wrote a blog post about this 2019. I think I wrote a blog post about that phone, I called it. So you can go and read it on the Sargenta blog site. And it shows like the Raspberry Pi in place and how I sort of wired it all up. But yeah, that was what we did. We sort of broke this phone in. We put the phone onto their network. No one could see it. No one could find it. It just looked like an ordinary normal phone, but it had a wireless access point built onto it. And so I just sat in the car park, logged into that Wi-Fi point, and then was straight onto the network, past all of their firewalls, all of their protections that they'd spent millions on. So yeah, they're great devices for putting in small assets. And now we've got stuff like the Raspberry Pi Zero. It's even smaller. Like, we can do some interesting things. Like I say, that was in 2013. So you can imagine the sort of stuff we're doing that I can't talk about now.
So do they give you limits? Like when you sign up, they say like, hey, you can, we want you to test this, but we don't want you breaking into this area because you might see top secret information or something?
Exactly. So every time we sort of do this type of assessment, there's always what's known as a scope, whether or not that's digital hacking or physically breaking in. There's always a scope of work, and that says what you can do and what you cannot do. We did my wife and I actually did a joint attack on a hospital a couple of years back. We broke in, but there were very, very strict guidelines as to which departments we were allowed to go in. Like, we weren't allowed to go into, obviously surgery, right? We weren't allowed to go into the maternity ward. There's going to be nothing of value there anyway. But we were allowed in certain areas. Like, could we get into the record stores? Could we get into like the data center? Could we get into the HVAC systems? So there's always like very, very strict guidelines as to what you can and cannot do, and also what actions you can and cannot do. Like, we are simulating criminals, but we cannot do criminal behaviors, right? We're not allowed to use violence, for example. I can't just go in with a gun and show up and, anyone's going to get in with that, right? I can't impersonate a police officer or anyone that would cause distress. So like, if you were to rock up and pretend to be a bomb squad and evacuate the building, well, that's going to work, but you'll be breaking a lot of laws and ethics. Like, because you have to be aware that sometimes what you're doing may stress someone out. They're already in a stressful situation. They're at work, they're doing whatever, and they might have a heart condition, or maybe they're pregnant and you might cause a miscarriage. Like, you don't know. So you have to be incredibly careful with the actions that you perform.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that is just awesome. So have you seen any new threats? Or are you concerned about what generative AI might be doing for security?
Not really. I mean, I know it's been a big thing, but I think it is a little bit overhyped. Hackers are lazy. They'll always do the easiest, cheapest, simplest thing. Criminal hackers, at least. So they're not. They might be using like AI for generating better phishing emails, for example, right? That's about the most I think we're going to be seeing in the immediate future anyway. For more esoteric, more interesting, futuristic things, I think we're going to have to wait. I think we're going to see maybe some of the governments doing that, but that's all going to be on their own hardware, own software. They're not going to be using like ChatGPT, for example. They're going to have their home brew stuff for working on that. So there's not really an emerging threat of like, oh my God, here's this new thing. It's more of like, here's some old stuff, maybe done slightly better. And as we know, like there's no real changes in security. It's the same threats, it's the same attacks. It's just maybe in a different vector or a different mechanism.
Yeah. So what's been your most favorite hack over the years? You've got 100% success rate. What's been your most favorite fun thing? It hasn't got to be something where you've stolen $1 million. Just something you've done something stupid and it's been fun.
There was one where they asked if we could get into like the main part of their building, and I didn't think it would happen, right? So I walk into this building, and I get past all this security, and I'm wandering around, and I end up on the vault floor, which is always at the bottom of the building, right? Because vaults are massive and they're very heavy. So they generally build the building around the vault. So I walk onto the vault floor, and I see the vault. It's one of those big flashy ones. And I'm like, oh, sweet. And it's open. The door is literally open. And I'm like, this is obviously a honeypot. Like, this is not the real vault. So I walk up to the thing. I'm not supposed to be anywhere near this. There's no one around. The floor is empty. Walk up to this vault, look into the vault, and there's these pallets of gold bars, and I'm like,
no, that's too easy.
That's ridiculous. Like, this is sketchy, right? So I think as soon as I walk in, like, the door's going to shut and some alarm's going to go off, right? So I walk in, and I'm like, all right, I'll take one of these gold bars. So I just picked up this gold bar, and they are heavy. They're really heavy, right? Like, people, you never see this in the movie. Like, we watched a movie the other day where this guy like picks up this like this gold bar, and he's literally holding it like this, like with his arm like this. Like, you are not supporting a gold bar with your wrist like this. This is ridiculous. Anyway, they're really, really heavy. So I get this thing, and I'm like, well, I can't just walk out with this gold bar. People are going to notice this gold bar. So I walk out into like the office space, and I find this rucksack that someone's left. So I just empty out their stuff, and I put this gold bar in. And I'm like, any second now, someone's going to stop me. And I like, walk out the building, I walk out the front door, and I've still got this like backpack with this one gold bar in. Honestly, if you ever watch a movie and they're like stuffing loads of gold bars into bags, like, it's going to rip. This thing was heavy, right? And it's got sharp edges. So I'm like, walk out, and I go around the corner to this coffee shop, and I phone the client, and I'm like, I've got one of your gold bars. And he's like, I'm like, yeah, like, and then I realized I'm sat in this coffee shop with it's like, you know, £250,000 of gold bar in my bag, and I'm like, you should come and get it. And so he literally runs into this coffee shop, and he's like there. So I just dump this gold bar out onto the desk, and I'm like, there you go. And he's like, it turned out what had happened was they were doing some auditing. They were like counting or something, and then moving some gold bars in and out of the vault. And the two guards that were supposed to be there had escorted the auditor out of the room to do some assaying on one of the gold bars. And they had it was literally just a 2-minute window. That's all I had, and I just lucked out massively. And that's what I mean. Like, yeah, that's all it takes. Was if I'd have been there any other time, I wouldn't have got in. But just that bit of timing meant I was able to walk in. And honestly, I've had people come back on this story saying that never happened. Like, you're telling lies. Like, no, honestly, dude, it actually happened.
I believe it.
2-minute window.
I absolutely believe it.
All that story is missing is a burlap sack with a big dollar sign on it.
I mean, get one of them.
I think what you're pointing out is that human incompetence is a big source of problems, and humans are going to continue to cause the issues, right?
Computers are never the issue. It's always humans at the end of the day. They're the ones that make things, but they're also the users of them, and the users are generally not at fault. So if the user does something wrong, it's generally because it's been designed incorrectly or it's been configured incorrectly. The user should never be blamed for something. It's always like who makes it should be blamed.
Yes. But who was at fault in that instance? Was it the security guards? Was it their boss?
It was their policies and procedures, to be honest. It was like, they should have more guards there in order to do that. And I've seen that many, many times where there has just not been enough guards put in place. There was one time I had to break into what's known as a dark site, which is a data center, right? So data centers, for those of you who don't know, is basically just a huge warehouse full of computers in massive racks, right? And they run all of the stuff. But a dark site is kind of, it's never visited, right? It's generally used by large financial institutions to hold all of their stuff, and nobody ever visits it. There's lights out basically 99% of the time, and there's generally only a couple of members of security allowed on, right? And visits are very, very rare. I managed to break into one of these dark sites once, and there was one chap in there. There was another security guard on the other side of the building, but this was the chap I was dealing with. And he was paying me no attention. Like, he didn't care that I was there. Like, he didn't know the rules and regulations about who should be there and why. So whilst he was trying to check it up, I was just stood in the reception. I say reception, it was like a security desk area. And he was very diligent about watching the CCTV cameras, like all the monitors, and I found that very odd. Like, why is he watching for criminals when I'm already in the building? Right, this has already violated the security. And it turns out that he was waiting for the lunch van. So this this sandwich van, I see it on the monitors. This sandwich van pulls up outside, and he turns to me as he's putting on this like big jacket because it's like snowing outside. He puts on this big jacket, and he's like, "Can you wait here a minute whilst I just pop outside?" And I'm like, "Okay, you have no idea who I am. You haven't got my
Yeah,
ID.
sure.
I shouldn't be in this building, but you're going to leave, and I'm going to be in here." And he walks out past these gates. There's like these massive iron gates that are there protecting it all. And he's right outside, right on the pavement, and I can see him. And my hand's over like the shutdown button, which means it would effectively lock him out of his building that he's protecting. And I'm like, there are some ethics that I have to deal with here. Like, this would be funny to lock the security guard out of his building,
Yeah.
but I have to like not do that. So I basically didn't lock him out. I ran off and I literally stole millions of pounds from this bank because I was able to get into their data center. So yeah, those policies and procedures like should have said if he needs to leave that desk, there should be someone there to replace him. I've done a couple of talks on this, and there's some great photos that I took from that job of me literally rifling through his personal bag to get keys and IDs and stuff, whilst he's in the photo watching the security cameras. It's a great photo. I'll have to try to get it.
Wow.
That's insane. I'm surprised you didn't offer
That's
to bring
cool.
you a sandwich.
Yeah, he didn't. Bugger.
Oh, swine.
I feel bad for I feel bad for that guy because he's probably got in big trouble.
He actually got fired, unfortunately. It's not something that we suggest that clients do. We're always about like educating people about this, but in that particular case, the client felt that his reactions and his actions caused the loss of millions of pounds. So it was hard to fight against that. I always advocate not doing that. You know, we've seen a lot of heavy-handedness from clients on some of the people that are targets of this attack, but we have to try and sort of remind them, like, these people are just ordinary people trying to do their job in a really stressful environment. I'm a professional at this. Like, no one's going to stop that. But, you know, in that case, that was one of the very few sad cases where someone did get fired.
So I really find interesting in hacking the social engineering aspects, and you are interfacing with a lot of people. Like you said, it's often user error that leads to these kind of vulnerabilities. Do you have any more stories where you have had a fun interaction with a person? Have you ever had to manipulate somebody to get what you needed done?
Yeah, so I actually don't like people. I don't like interacting with people. I wouldn't call myself a great social engineer because I prefer not to deal with people. I prefer that physically bypassing things. Yeah, it does become hard when you can't social engineer a door to open itself unless you've got permission to pick the locks and whatnot, because we can't like break it down, right? So we have to go through certain procedures. But I think the funniest interaction I've had with a human was the first time I kidnapped someone, which was hilarious. It is in the book, this story. So sorry, Les, if you haven't read this bit so far. But there is it's called My First Kidnapping, I believe. I can't remember what chapter it is, but you'll find out. Basically, I had to get into a data center, and I had done a lot of recon outside, and there were two security teams. The security teams were made up of ex-Gurkha soldiers, so pretty hardened guys. Thankfully, they were in a country where guns were not allowed, right? And they weren't allowed their kukris. So all was good. I drove my hire car, through the gates at a specific time and grabbed a guy, one of the Gurkhas, and chucked him in the back, kidnapped him, drove off out of the site. And, you know, yeah, the story goes into more detail in the book. I don't want to ruin it for anyone. Basically, I ended up kidnapping this guy, and he was super chill about it. And then about a year later, I have to go back to the same data center. And as I'm there, I'm not doing a physical pen test. I'm there for digital work for the client, and I walk into the data center, and I go through all the security stuff as you normally would, rather than breaking in this time. And I see the chap that I had kidnapped, and he clocks me, and his eyes just light up, and he comes running towards me, and I'm like, oh, I am so buggered right now. Like, this is not going to go well. He comes running up to me, and he is so excited. He's literally jumping up and down, going, it's you. Oh my God, I can't believe it's you. And he's calling his mates out, and he's like, this is the guy that kidnapped me. I told you it all happened. They apparently had not believed him when he said that they'd got kidnapped, because they thought that he had buggered off on like some cigarette break or something, and it just like left his post when he shot that. And that was how they got compromised. So yeah, it was amazing. Like, this guy was so fun. He was just like so over the moon that he'd got kidnapped. It was just like the weirdest interaction I think I've had.
That's great. So,
That's cool.
Ash, what have you been using for security testing with Raspberry Pi?
Did you say me?
You said you've been trying to you've been trying to do some things with Raspberry Pi to test security.
Oh yeah, well I think hacking is cool. I used to take computer networking, and they always said, we're not going to teach you how to hack, we're going to teach you how hackers hack. And so ever since I've been into Raspberry Pi, I like looking at all the different tools that you can use for that sort of thing. And I just wanted to talk about a couple of tools that I found that I think people might want to look up if they're into this sort of thing, and also a really cool project that somebody made so that you can build your own Raspberry Pi hacking kit for on-the-go stuff. FC, maybe you'll need this.
Yeah.
So the first obvious one that I've got to mention is Kali Linux. I'm showing you the wrong thing, which you mentioned earlier, but it's a lot easier to install now. They have a setup for it now. That's easy to install on ARM devices, so Raspberry Pi, or I'm not going to mention the rival boards, but you can see them listed over here, different fruits. But this is a really good tool to use for any kind of pen testing, and because the Raspberry Pi is as mobile as it is, it's pretty useful for pen testing, whether you want to check out your business security, your home security, that kind of thing. Kali Linux is one tool that you need to keep in mind for that sort of thing. The other tool that I wanted to show you guys, this is an article I wrote a couple of years ago, but I thought it was really neat. It's called Open Canary. And this article is from 2020, so I'm sure it's changed a little bit since then. But it's open source, it's totally free. You can monitor your network security with it. It runs on a Raspberry Pi, and I think you have to install Ubuntu. I'm going to pronounce it. I don't know how to pronounce it anymore. I've been corrected so many times. I've been saying Ubuntu for so many years. I'm just going to go with that. But anyway, you install Open Canary on top of that, and it can send you email notifications if it thinks there's a potential threat, any kind of possible security breach. And I like the idea that it will notify you, because there are a lot of ways you can set up notifications so that maybe it goes to your smartphone, maybe you get a text, that kind of thing, and then you're the security engineer at that point. That's pretty cool. At last, I wanted to show you guys this really cool backpack. I think it's cool anyway. It's got so much hardware inside. Of course, it's got a Raspberry Pi inside, but they've got a speaker. I guess you can listen to music while you hack, but they have a router so that you can make your own wireless access point. There's a big power brick, of course, to power everything. I mean, this thing is just nuts how much it's got inside. They have a hack RF device with an antenna. There's a docking station with all kinds of different ports, so you can add and remove devices as you need to do your testing. But I mean, it really is the ultimate hacking on the go kit. And you can find that on tomshardware.com. I think it was made by David Marchetti. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. But it's really cool. I think it's really cool anyway.
That was an awesome backpack.
Yeah, that looks really cool.
Just imagine TSA seeing that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Don't take it through an airport, I would suggest.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they had to do some soldering with that. Les, you have a soldering iron that you've been trying out.
That is a seamless segue there, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
There we go. Well, we have the Finersi HS01 soldering iron. And you're thinking, where's the hot bit? Well, it's got a cap to protect your fingers. There you go.
Ooh.
Smart soldering iron. This is roughly, now let me just go to AliExpress where I purchased this, and I'll tell you the price right now. In dollars, it is $27
That's not
for a
bad.
smart soldering iron. It goes up to about 420 degrees C. Interchangeable tips. Just pull the collet off there.
Let it cool down.
Take the
for a
tip off. Possibly, yeah. Yeah. Be careful, kids. You're going to burn your fingers. Put your new tip on and plug in USB-C for the power. Just there. And away you go. You're soldering. So this could have been handy for FC when he was hacking that Raspberry Pi VoIP phone.
Yeah, because I did that in a hotel room with with a plug-in soldering iron. So yeah, that would have been amazing. I would love to see if you could overclock that to something a little bit hotter.
Probably. This one, I'm not too sure the firmware on this. I've not been able to find much on, but I'll just go to the massive pot of soldering irons I've got here. Pinesol V2, you can hack the firmware on that, custom temperature profiles, so you could do that quite easily. TS101, same again, they use a very, I think it's the same firmware. And obviously we've got Pinesol original, you could do it with that one. This new one though, for nursing, not sure, but it is a great iron. I'm doing the review on it right now. And I've had great fun soldering stuff. I've got all sorts of weird and wonderful stuff. We have beginnings of a PIC programming kit for the old PIC microcontrollers.
Nice.
That's old school. And then something from Pocket Moneytronics, which is just a quiz game. So you just press the button to answer a question. Press that and fastest finger first makes the lights turn on. But it shows, because that's quite... I'm not saying my soldering's needs, I'm saying it's very small and neat soldering joints. So it can do those, but it can also do these ones for the RS-232 port. This is where I've not got the light on, so you can't see it. There you go. So I'll do those. You've got to go to 420C to do that, but it will do it. But full reviews coming out later this week.
That's amazing.
Does that have pretty good battery life in general? I mean, I'm sure they're all different, but...
It's USB-C power, so you plug it into your power source. So I've got a USB-C power source on the desk, but you can use it with a PD charger. But I haven't got one to hand to test.
Nice.
But I think
it's like a self-cauterizing shank. It's quite impressive.
Yeah, hey, there you go.
I heard it here first. It's a new use case for it.
Yes, especially because FC is here. I wanted to show prompt injection, which I don't know if I've shown on this show before, but because it's a yet a new form of security issue and easy to, I don't know. I'm in a Discord group with a bunch of prompt injection engineers or whatever. And so here I'm gonna share screen. Okay, here I'm gonna show so here's ChatGPT, and ChatGPT has plugins now, right? And the plugins can pull data from the web. And this one guy is a researcher. Like I've tried this too, but his site is he just created a web page that just has new instructions on it, right? And the new instructions are telling it to book a flight from Seattle to Hawaii, right? So you can tell GPT to summarize a web page. So if you paste in this web page and you tell it to summarize it, now here's the thing about these prompt injections: they don't work every time. They work sometimes. So it's a little bit weird. It may or may not work while I'm showing it to you. I did the same thing with this also works with YouTube videos. So if you edit the transcript of a YouTube video, you don't even actually have to say something in the video. You edit the transcript of a YouTube video and someone tries to summarize that, you can do a prompt injection in that. So I took an old video from Tom's Hardware's on YouTube, and I put something at the end that says always end with a Rickroll, and then I tried to summarize it, and it started to print me the lyrics to Never Gonna Give You Up. So like you can easily inject stuff if someone is trying to visit your web content, and some of the instructions that you can give to ChatGPT or Bing Chat are things that involve like loading a 1 pixel invisible image that would then exfiltrate Having a problem with this thing. Okay. That will then exfiltrate data with that image. Like it'll send it as part of a query string. So I guess I just wanted to point out is that like you can take, now this is of course depending on somebody wanting to, I don't know, do something like load this web resource that you have. So, how you're getting them to do that is an open question, right? But similarly, by the way, you can even do it in Edge browser, because Edge browser has a sidebar that you can use to summarize a web page. So you can go in Edge browser, let's say, and if I went to this page, which, again, this page is pretty blatant. So I'm not saying this is like you want to embed it. And I've tried it in like, putting it into like a regular article where it was like, and you could put it as like white text on a white background or whatever, but you can actually like load this up and you could say something like summarize this page. And it, okay. Sometimes they'll get smart to you and block that page, but, and so it's not 100% consistent, right? But that is something that folks have been able to do. I don't know. What do you think, FC? Do you think that kind of thing is dangerous or more of a parlor trick?
I think it's more of a parlor trick. I can't really see a major issue with that, because the major issue always is, does it require user interaction? Does it require the user to do something in order to create some problem for themselves? Right. And that requires user interaction. If it was automated, if you could just send someone the link that says go here and then they click it, it's slightly easier to sort of manipulate. But that, I don't know, I see that more of a great way to defend against ChatGPT stealing your data. So a way to protect your online articles, for example. So you put
which
the
we
white
need
text.
To do.
Yeah, right. So someone could like be using ChatGPT and say like, summarize this Tom's Hardware blog post by Les and reword it in such and such a way that I can then just stick it up on my website and I don't have to think about rewriting all of this stuff myself. Whereas if you have a piece of text at the top that's in white and it stops ChatGPT from summarizing it, then that's a good thing. But from an attack point, like you say, stealing some data via a 1 pixel image, yeah, that's cool, but they still have to make ChatGPT visit that document. Mm-hmm. So right. Yeah, it's an interesting area, but what's the end goal? Who are you trying to attack there? But I think that is actually it's a good way of defending against ChatGPT.
Yeah, I mean, I won't belabor this point, but we have an article up that I posted this weekend about Google's search generative experience, which is basically a plagiarism engine. It takes content from various web pages, including ours, takes a sentence each and creates its own content. And like if they follow through with making this beta, which is in public beta experience live, they would be basically replacing the first page of search with their plagiarized answer. So, but part of the thing that's interesting that is potentially a security hole there is that right now anyway, the search tool is not very the bot that is copying stuff is not very discerning about where it gets the information from.
Yeah.
So, for example, I asked it yesterday how to install Android Windows subsystem for Android, which is an Android emulator that is built into Windows. And it gave me an instruction which said to go to this Russian website, which has like this hacking tool on it. So like if you write an article that is telling people to do something that is dangerous and against their interest, it may get sucked up into Google's answer.
Yeah. But that's the same with any plagiarism. It's like there's loads of articles out there. I think I think what we need is something like, the robots.txt that says these pages can, like an AI.txt, like, you can look
Don't
at these
train.
pages, but not, don't train on these.
Don't
pages.
train. Yeah. I agree. It doesn't exist yet, but I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much, FC, for joining us. I really
thank you for having me.
recommend your book, Show the Book Again, which is available, I assume, on Amazon and other
Everywhere.
where books
Everywhere.
are sold. How I Rob Banks. I can't wait to read it. It seems like hilarious. I think I'll read it to my son at bedtime.
The kidnapping stories, chapter 11, by the way.
Yeah, there's a couple of stories you don't want to tell your kids in there.
Okay,
it's rated 18.
Okay, I'll
skip a few of those.
I'll skip that. But thank you so much for joining us. This has been one of my favorite shows that we've ever had. And for everybody else, we'll be back next week at June 20th at the usual time, 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. UK time. And we'll see you then. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.